June 15, 1944. Red Beach, Saipan. The sea is already burning. Naval shells scream overhead and vanish into the green ridges beyond the shore. Landing craft slam against the surf. Machine gun fire chatters from hidden mouths in the coral rock, a hard metallic sound, swallowed and thrown back by the cliffs. Smoke drifts low over the water, thick with fuel oil salt and pulverized sand. Somewhere ahead, a man is shouting for a corpsman. Somewhere to the left, a tracked engine is revving at full throttle, straining against the beach as if the machine itself is afraid. Private First Class Dale M. Hansen of the 2nd Marine Division drops into the shallow shadow of a wrecked seawall and presses his face into the hot grit. His rifle is half filled with sand. His heart is hammering so hard he can feel it through the stock against his chest. He cannot see the Japanese defenders clearly, only flashes brief and murderous from dark openings cut into the high ground inland. A bunker fires, vanishes, then fires again. A cave mouth spits tracers. A mortar round lands short in the surf and showers the beach with white water and fragments. This is what makes the Japanese defense on Saipan so dangerous. Not the noise, not the fanaticism Americans have been warned about since Guadalcanal. It is the fact that the enemy is buried, deeply buried. The men of Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito's garrison have spent months carving fighting positions into Saipan's coral volcanic folds and limestone ridges. Their machine guns are not out in the open where naval guns can smash them. Their riflemen are not lined neatly in trenches to be rolled up by artillery. They are inside the island, hidden in caves behind rock shutters under reinforced roofs of logs and earth. When the shelling lifts, they open fire from places that seem impossible to kill. And for the first Marines clawing their way off the beach, that realization arrives fast. A Sherman tank lumbers inland through the smoke, its steel hull smeared with salt spray and sand. Men glance at it as if it were a moving fortress. On most battlefields it would be. The M4, a Sherman with its 75 mm gun and machine guns, is a powerful answer to bunkers and infantry. But Saipan is not most battlefields. A shell can blast the front of a cave, yes. It can crack concrete, tear apart a visible pillbox. But the Japanese have gone underground and backward into the slopes. The gun flashes, the round hits, and for a second, the opening disappears in dust. Then the dust clears, and the same cave opens up again. The tank fires once more. Then again. The Marines rise to move behind it, and the hidden position erupts with machine gun fire as if nothing has happened. Somewhere in those dark chambers, Japanese soldiers are laughing, not because they do not fear death. By the summer of 1944, many of them already expect it. They laugh because they believe they have solved the American machine. They have watched the Navy pound the beaches for days. They have endured the bombardment deep inside rock. Now they watch tanks grind forward and blast the entrances of caves that only lead into deeper chambers. To defenders inside Saipan's ridgelines, American armor must have seemed blind, huge, noisy, and stupid, firing at a mountain. Captain James Rowe of the 4th Marine Division sees the problem by late afternoon. His men have taken ground technically. The maps say they have advanced inland from the beaches. But every fold in the terrain contains another hidden gun. Every ravine is covered by fire. Every cave not sealed by demolition remains alive. The Japanese are letting Marines pass, then opening fire from the rear or the flank. The island is fighting from inside itself. A rifle platoon moves toward one suspected opening near a patch of broken cane and blasted brush. The Japanese wait until the Americans are close enough to hear their boots on stone, and then a machine gun rips through the lead squad. Men dive flat. A bar gunner fires into the darkness until the barrel glows. Grenades go in. Smoke comes out. Then a voice from inside calls in sharp Japanese, and another firing slit farther upslope opens like an eye. This is the trap. One cave is not one bunker. One bunker is not one room. The defenses are layered, tunneled, connected, hidden behind stone and coral. A position can survive bombardment, absorb grenades, and still kill anything that approaches its mouth. To take it, an American infantryman often has to walk straight into the black opening and destroy it by hand. And that is exactly what makes close assault so costly. By evening, the officers on Saipan are already drawing on lessons learned from Tarawa and Kwajalein. Explosives help. Satchel charges help. Tank fire helps sometimes, but against deep reverse-slope cave systems, what is needed is not simply blast. It is penetration. Something that can reach into the dark around the bend in the tunnel, under the overhang, through the firing slit, and do what artillery cannot empty the bunker of oxygen, light, and courage in a single burst. The Marines already know such a weapon exists. Portable flamethrowers have been used in the Pacific with terrible effect. Men carrying M-2 flamethrowers, fuel tanks strapped to their backs, can project a stream of burning fuel into trenches, caves, and apertures. But the weapon has limits. The operator must get close. Too close. He is visible, slow, heavily burdened, and a prime target for every rifle and machine gun on the ridge. Against the kind of cave systems now encountered on Saipan, getting a man close enough to use a flamethrower often means sacrificing him before he can fire. So an idea already tested in rough form and whispered through the armored and engineer units begins to acquire urgency. Take the flame projector, put it on a tank, wrap the operator in steel. Let the machine crawl right up to the mouth of the mountain. On Saipan, that transformation is not yet fully mature. The specialized armored flamethrower tanks that will become infamous later in the war are still evolving, still being improvised, still being refined by Marines Army engineers, Navy Seabees, and ordnance men who understand that the Pacific has become a war against stone. But the need is now unmistakable. Every bunker that survives shell fire is an argument. Every cave that swallows grenades is a demand. As darkness falls over the beachhead, the firing does not stop. It shifts. Single shots crack from the slopes. Wounded men groan under ponchos. Engines idle in the dark. And up in those limestone ridges, Japanese defenders remain sealed, inside positions that have endured the fleet, the artillery, and the tank gun. For tonight, the caves still belong to them. June 18, 1944. Inland from Charinkanoa Airfield, Saipan. By morning, the island is louder. Artillery from offshore resumes at first light, the shells rolling over the ridges with a deep, stomach-shaking concussion. Marine mortars answer from newly dug positions behind the line. Then come the tanks, their engines louder than men's voices, their tracks biting coral, crushing brush. Snapping the volcanic crust as they move toward ground that infantry alone cannot clear. Near one shattered rise overlooking the approach inland, Technical Sergeant Robert Bob Dunham of a Marine Engineer Detachment crouches beside the hull of a Sherman and studies the slope ahead through narrowed eyes. The hill looks empty at first. Then he sees it not a bunker in the usual sense, but a shadow where no shadow should be. A slit of black under a rock shelf. Brush around it is cut too neatly. The stone beneath it is scorched from gun flashes. Another cave. There is a dead Marine 20 yards from the opening, still lying where he fell in the previous afternoon's assault. Dunham stares at the body for half a second, then looks away. No one says what all of them are thinking. If they go at this position the old way, more men will be left there by noon. The infantry commander wants the cave closed now. A rifle company is pinned on the forward slope. Each attempt to move along the ridge draws fire from the hidden opening and from at least one supporting position somewhere beyond it. Grenades have already failed. Demolition charges have been tried, but getting them close enough has cost too many casualties. So the engineers and tank crews begin assembling a closer, uglier solution. The Pacific War has a way of forcing invention under fire. Some of the earliest armored flamethrowers used by American forces are improvised conversions, crude, hazardous, but promising. On Saipan and the campaigns leading into it, Army and Marine units experiment with ways to mount flame systems onto tanks or use flame projectors in tight coordination with armor. The concept is not elegant yet. It does not need to be. It only needs to work long enough to break positions that normal fire cannot neutralize. The Sherman beside Dunham is not a purpose-built flame tank in the polished, standardized sense that later models will become. It is an adaptation heavy with fittings and hoses, crewmen moving around it with the focused tension of mechanics who know their lives depend on every clamp and valve. The turret still carries the authority of armor, but what matters now is the nozzle system attached for close assault. Fuel pressure, ignition, range. One chance to get close enough. Inside the cave, Japanese troops of the 43rd Division wait. The defenders on Saipan have learned to respect American artillery, but they do not yet fully understand what is now crawling toward them. They know tanks. They know naval gunfire. They know mortars, grenades, and demolition charges. Most of these can be endured inside deep-cut stone. In caves with bends, chambers, and blast protection, even direct hits can be survived. The Americans make noise. They shake the earth. Then infantry comes forward, and the Japanese fire into them from the dark. That pattern has repeated often enough to become a kind of confidence. The tank rolls forward. Riflemen hug the ground behind it. A barman fires bursts toward the slope above the cave to keep heads down. A machine gun from the supporting platoon rakes a second fissure farther upslope. The Sherman takes a hit not from anything heavy, but from small arms fire pinging uselessly off the armor. Another shot cracks from the cave. Then another. The tank keeps coming. At 30 yards, the cave opens up with everything inside it. Tracers slash outward. Sparks jump from the tank's hull. An anti-tank mine buried shallow and triggered too early erupts beneath one track in a geyser of dirt and coral. For a second, the Marines think the vehicle is disabled. It lurches, then moves again. The crew has no room left for hesitation now. The driver angles the hull toward the opening. The flame operator lines up on the dark slit in the rock. Men nearby flatten instinctively. Even those who have seen flamethrowers before know the first burst can backflash, sputter, fail, or transform the entire hillside in an instant. The projector fires. It is not a simple jet of fire as the movies later imagine it. It is a violent stream of ignited fuel, thick and deliberate, pouring into the opening, with a roar that sounds almost alive. Flame splashes against the rock, then curls inward, sucked down the throat of the cave by its own momentum and the draw of air inside. Black smoke bellows outward. There is a sharp animal scream from within, then another, then a chorus of voices shouting in Japanese. The Marines do not move. No one needs to tell them what is happening inside. Fire in the open kills with heat. Fire in a cave kills with heat, smoke pressure, panic, and the sudden removal of escape. Oxygen burns away. Fuel clings to walls, floors, uniform, skin. The flame reaches around corners where bullets cannot. It invades chambers that no shell can reach. A bunker designed to survive bombardment becomes in seconds a sealed furnace. The firing from the cave stops. Then, unexpectedly, a Japanese soldier bursts out of the entrance, clothes smoking, face-blackened hands clawing at the air. A Marine rifle cracks once, and the man drops. Another stumbles out behind him, half-blind, and collapses on the slope. A third never clears the opening. The cave mouth glows orange for an instant, then vomits thicker smoke. Silence follows, not true silence, because Saipan is never quiet now, but a local silence, the sudden deadness of a position that had been lethal moments before. The infantry moves. Dunham and 2 engineers rush in behind the tank carrying demolition charges and white phosphorus grenades. They do not enter the cave. No one is eager to step into that blackened throat unless ordered. Instead, they throw charges deep into the entrance, then pile debris sandbags and rock against the opening. Another blast seals part of it. Flame has emptied the bunker. Explosives make sure it stays that way. By midday, the lesson is spreading through the units on the line. Cave after cave, bunker after bunker, the same truth emerges. The Japanese defensive system is strongest, where it is deepest, hardest, and most protected from blast. And that is exactly what makes it vulnerable to flame. The men inside those fortifications are beginning to understand this too. What had once seemed almost comical, an American tank waddling up to a mountain, is becoming something else entirely. The defenders can still kill riflemen. They can still endure shelling. But now, the Americans possess a weapon that does not merely hit the entrance. It enters, and once it does, the cave is no longer a fortress. It is a trap. February 19th, 1945. Iwo Jima, near the first terrace below Mount Suribachi. The black sand will not hold a man. It gives under boots and tank tracks alike loose and choking, swallowing momentum the moment it touches weight. Landing craft grind open onto a shore that looks almost dead. No dramatic wall of machine gun fire. At first, no single line of defenders rising to meet the invasion. Just volcanic grit, wrecked surf, and the looming bulk of Suribachi under a sky smeared with smoke from naval bombardment. Then the island opens its eyes. Artillery flashes from hidden positions inland. Mortars begin to fall with frightening precision. Machine guns fire from concrete and rock from pillboxes buried so deeply that only their apertures are visible from caves cut into the terraces and reverse slopes behind the beach. Marines who have fought on Tarawa, Saipan, and Tinian know the pattern now. The Japanese are not defending the waterline. They are defending depth, and on Iwo Jima depth has become science. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi has transformed the island into a fortress beneath the surface. His men have linked bunkers, pillboxes, and caves through tunnels carved into volcanic rock. Positions are arranged to support one another. A machine gun silenced from the front may be backed by another firing from an unseen flank. A cave mouth blasted by naval shells may still lead to chambers alive with infantry and ammunition farther inside. The island is not a set of defenses, it is one defense, and by the afternoon of the first day, men in the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions begin to understand that ordinary tank support will not be enough. Staff Sergeant William Bill Genaust of a Marine assault team crouches beside the lip of a shell crater inland from the beaches, staring at a low ridge studded with concrete and ash. A bunker there has already survived naval gunfire. A 75 mm tank shell struck the embrasure and only scarred it. Engineers tried to approach with satchel charges. 2 were hit before they got halfway. The position is still alive, firing in carefully timed bursts. Every advance up the terrace ends with Marines pinned flat in the sulfurous dust. Then a new sound reaches them through the bombardment. Not the sharp bark of guns, not the hard clanking of an ordinary Sherman climbing broken ground. This sound is deeper, steadier, accompanied by the distinctive growl of engines pushing heavy armor over soft volcanic earth. Men turn their heads. Coming up from the beach are tanks of the 4th Tank Battalion, and attached armored flame vehicles not improvised now, but far more refined than what had been fielded months earlier in the Marianas. Among the most feared are the Sherman-based Flamethrower tanks, equipped with the Navy-developed Ronson system the vehicle's Marines would soon call Zippos. They still look like tanks. That is part of the horror. They retain the armored authority of the M4 Sherman Hull low and broad turret rotating tracks biting into the slope. But where the Japanese once saw only another gun platform, there is now something worse. In many of these vehicles, the main gun has been modified or replaced to project flame. Fuel mixture is carried inside armored compartments. Ignition is reliable, range is better. Crew protection is far superior to that of a man with tanks on his back and a hose in his hands. This is flame with armor engineering and doctrine behind it. A Japanese machine gun crew inside the bunker on the ridge has probably seen tanks before. They have likely watched American shells hammer fortifications on Saipan and Tinian and learned to wait them out. They know the Americans will bring armor close fire point blank, then try to rush infantry in. Inside reinforced concrete and volcanic rock, they may even feel a measure of contempt. Let the tank come close. Let it waste rounds. Let the Marines rise and die in front of the embrasure. The Zippo halts below the ridge and traverses slowly. A rifleman beside Gnaust mutters, "God help whoever's in there." Then the flame projects. The burst is longer than what many Marines saw months earlier. It surges outward with shocking force, a brilliant stream of burning fuel slamming into the bunker aperture and splashing across the concrete face before being sucked inward through the firing slit and vent openings. Fire rolls over the front of the position. Smoke erupts, black and oily. The tank closes a few yards more and fires again this time, angling the stream to catch a secondary opening partly hidden by rock. Something changes in the bunker immediately. The machine gun stops, not gradually, instantly. No one inside can ignore what is happening. A shell strike is impact and concussion. Flame is invasion. It moves where blast cannot. It flows into corners over ammunition crates, into vent shafts, across firing steps. It blinds. It suffocates. It heats the confined air until every instinct screams to escape, even when escape means running into Marine rifles. A hatch-sized slit on the side of the bunker suddenly opens, and two Japanese soldiers scramble out, one of them on fire. Another tries to drag a light machine gun with him, then abandons it and falls face first down the slope. Marine rifles crack. The bunker, which had pinned a company for hours, is dead in less than a minute. And that is when the real turning point begins. Because on Iwo Jima, one bunker is never just one bunker. It is tied to caves and pillboxes farther up the ridge. Each destroyed position reveals another. Each sealed entrance hides a tunnel branch beyond. The flame tanks become less a supporting weapon than a method, a grim system for unmaking the island, one opening at a time. They move with infantry and engineers in practiced rhythm. Tanks close on cave mouths under covering fire. Flame goes in. Demolition teams follow. Satchel charges white phosphorus bulldozers when available. Sometimes even tank blades shoving rubble into entrances while the smell of burned fuel still hangs in the air. The sequence repeats all over the island, at the first airfield, along the terraces around the approaches to Suribachi, and later in the northern meat grinder, where ridges, ravines, and hidden strongpoints bleed the Marines day after day. The Japanese reaction changes too. At first, there is disbelief, then caution, then fear. Kuribayashi's men remain disciplined, often fanatically so, but they are not immune to terror. Survivors dragged from blackened caves or sealed chambers carry stories through the tunnel systems. The Americans have tanks that breathe fire, not just infantry flamethrowers that can be shot before they reach the entrance. Tanks, armored monsters that can roll up through shell fire, ignore rifle bullets, and pour burning fuel into places thought invulnerable. On an island where survival depends on staying underground, that realization is devastating. By late February, some Marine units request flamethrower tanks almost automatically when they encounter stubborn strongpoints. Commanders have seen the alternative. Without flame, Caves must often be reduced with grenades charges and direct assault at murderous cost. With flame, the same position can sometimes be neutralized in minutes. Not always cleanly, not always without risk. Japanese anti-tank guns, mines, and artillery still kill these vehicles. But where they survive long enough to fire, they change the battle. The men inside the bunkers had once laughed at American tanks because steel and shells could be endured. Now steel has brought fire inside the mountain. April 19th, 1945. South of the Machinato Line, Okinawa. Rain hangs in the air, but the ground is already ruined. Tracks have churned the red-brown earth into a paste that sucks at boots and wheels. Shell craters brim with water. The ridges ahead are veiled in mist, their reverse slopes, invisible hiding guns that have already ranged every approach. American artillery hammers the heights in slow, methodical belts. Naval fire thunders from offshore. Aircraft rake suspected positions. Yet, when the infantry rises to move, the same thing happens again and again, machine gun fire from nowhere. Mortar shells dropping into the open, rifle shots snapping from caves and tomb-like recesses cut into the hills. By Okinawa, the pattern is familiar. The killing has become technical. Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima's 32nd Army has abandoned the idea of stopping the Americans at the beaches. Instead, the Japanese have prepared a layered defense in the south centered on fortified ridges, caves, tombs, reverse slopes, and interlocking strongpoints. Kakazu Ridge, Dakeshi, Sugarloaf, Shuri, Yonabaru. Names that will become synonymous with mud artillery and close-range death. The old fantasy of a fast advance is gone within days. Every rise in the earth is another bunker system. Every bunker system has depth. And by now, the Americans have a weapon for depth. Near a blasted slope below a coral-studded escarpment, Captain Harold P. Fields of the 96th Infantry Division watches an armored flamethrower tank edge forward through drizzle and smoke. The infantry has been stalled since dawn by a cave complex set into the reverse face of the ridge. Tank destroyers have fired into visible openings. Artillery has bracketed the crest. Engineers have tried to work around the flank and found another hidden firing slit waiting for them. The position remains alive because, like so many Japanese defenses on Okinawa, it is not really a single position at all. It is a honeycomb. Fields has seen what happens when men go in without armor. A flamethrower operator on foot can do terrible work, but he has to survive the approach. On Okinawa, with machine guns concealed in tombs, caves, and stone terraces, surviving the approach is often the hardest part. So now the tank goes first. The armored flamethrowers used here are no longer experimental curiosities. They are integrated into the assault doctrine of late Pacific warfare. U.S. Army and Marine forces employ specialized flame tanks, including variants converted from Sherman chassis, alongside engineers' demolition teams and infantry. The exact configuration varies by unit and theater, but the principle is now proven beyond argument. If the Japanese are going to bury themselves in the island, then the Americans will bring fire to the island's interior. The tank crawls up through the mud turret's shifting hull, rocking as the driver searches for traction. Japanese defenders fire on it with rifles, machine guns, sometimes anti-tank guns if they have the angle. Mud splashes across the hull. A round clangs off the armor. Another strikes the ground beneath the bow. The vehicle keeps moving. Then one of the cave mouths opens just a flash, a burst of muzzle fire from blackness under an overhang. The tank answers with flame. The stream punches into the opening and vanishes inside. Smoke blows back in a sudden wave. The second burst is directed higher into a vent cut into the slope. The third washes across a recessed entrance, almost invisible behind broken stone. Infantrymen on either side keep low faces turned away from the heat. Some have seen this dozens of times by now, but they still flinch. Fire from a tank is not simply seen. It is felt a shove of heat against the skin, a roar in the chest, the smell of burning fuel and scorched earth mixing with wet mud and cordite. Inside the ridge, Japanese soldiers are running out of choices. A cave is a fortress until the flame arrives. Then it becomes a sealed chamber with only bad options. Stay inside and risk burning, suffocating, or being entombed when engineers demolish the entrance. Come out and face rifle fire grenades or a second jet of flame. On Okinawa, where so much of the defense depends on protected underground spaces, this is more than tactical pressure. It is psychological collapse applied one bunker at a time. Not all positions break immediately. Some defenders remain in place until they die. Others retreat through tunnel branches to secondary chambers and resume firing later from another opening. That is what makes Okinawa so brutal. Even successful reduction is rarely neat. A cave may be flamed blown shut, then reopen hours later from a hidden exit farther down the line. A ridge may seem dead until dusk and then erupt again. The Americans are learning that on Okinawa, flame is often the first step, not the last. Engineers must follow with explosives. Bulldozers must bury entrances. Infantry must occupy the ground. Then they must do it again on the next hill. At places like Kakuzu Ridge in April and later around the Shuri defenses in May, this method hardens into routine. Tanks and infantry work in close coordination. One squad suppresses visible openings. Engineers mark suspected vents and crawl routes. Armored flamethrowers move up under cover project flame into apertures, then reverse before artillery or anti-tank fire can bracket them. Demolition teams close in to seal what the flames have emptied. Sometimes tanks are lost doing it. Mines shear tracks. Hidden guns punch through side armor. Mortars rain down on stalled vehicles. The crews know all of this. They go forward anyway. The Japanese know what is coming too. By this stage of the war, stories about the flame tanks have spread across the Pacific. On Saipan and Tinian, cave garrisons learned what it meant. On Iwo bunker networks, felt it at close range. On Okinawa, the fear arrives before the flame itself. Men inside defensive chambers can hear the tank engines approaching through rock and mud. They know the sound. They know what usually follows. Some positions increase fire desperately, trying to kill the vehicle before it reaches range. Others remain silent, hoping not to reveal the opening. But a silent cave can still be found by observation, by engineers, by infantrymen, studying scorch marks and airflow, by a bulldozer, exposing the entrance by a tank, simply hosing suspected apertures with burning fuel until something inside reacts. In that sense, the armored flamethrower is more than a weapon. It is the answer to the late-war Japanese defensive philosophy itself. The Japanese had built for endurance, for surviving bombardment, for letting the Americans exhaust themselves against stone. The flame tank breaks that equation. It does not care that the bunker is deep. In fact, depth helps it. The deeper the tunnel and the more confined the chamber, the worse the effect of heat smoke and terror. The stronger the cave, the harder it is to escape. What had once made these defenses almost untouchable now makes them vulnerable in a different, more intimate way. By June 1945, as organized resistance on Okinawa begins to fracture under relentless bombardment and attrition, the lesson is complete. The Pacific War has become a war of reducing islands from the outside in. An armored flame has become one of the tools best suited to that grim labor. Not glorious, not clean, but brutally effective. For the Japanese defenders who once trusted the mountain to protect them, the mountain has turned against them. June 21st, 1945. Southern Okinawa near the collapsing Shuri defenses. The rain has stopped, but the island still smolders. Across the broken ridges south of Shuri, smoke clings to the ground and drifts through shattered tombs, blasted tree lines, and cave mouths blackened by heat. The artillery has moved farther ahead now. The front has not gone nowhere on Okinawa does violence vanish so neatly, but something has changed. Positions that once held for days are falling in hours. Caves that swallowed rifle companies are being reduced one by one. The ground is still paid for in blood, but the method has hardened. The Americans know how to tear open the fortress. A Marine or infantryman standing on one of these ridges in late June could look back across a year of Pacific fighting and see the evolution clearly. At Saipan, the problem had revealed itself in full artillery, and direct fire could batter the entrances of Japanese cave positions, but could not reliably kill the defenders inside. The island taught the Americans that the Japanese were no longer simply defending beaches or trench lines. They were defending geology. Coral lava, reverse slopes, limestone cuts, tombs, and tunnels had become weapons. At Iwo Jima, that lesson turned into doctrine. There, under Kuribayashi's meticulously engineered system, the cave war reached its most concentrated form. The defenders had buried themselves so deeply and connected their positions so cleverly that ordinary assault methods bled the Marines white. Flamethrower tanks did not win Iwo Jima alone. No single weapon could do that, but they changed the cost of attacking certain strong points. A bunker that might otherwise consume half a day and a platoon's worth of casualties could sometimes be neutralized in minutes by armored flame, followed by demolition. On Okinawa, the process became almost industrial in its precision. Infantry engineers, artillery tanks, and flame vehicles were now parts of the same machine. Suppress the aperture. Bring up the flame tank. Burn the chamber. Seal the entrance. Move to the next one. Repeat under rain mortar fire, sniper fire, and shell bursts until the ridge was dead. That rhythm defined the final island battles. A platoon from the 7th Infantry Division waits below a ridge pocked with caves, while an armored flamethrower Sherman inches forward through churned mud. The men are exhausted, uniforms stiff with dirt, hands trembling from lack of sleep, nerves blunted and sharpened at the same time. They have seen enough by now to know what the tank is about to do. Some stare at the cave openings, others avoid looking at them. The tank halts fires, and the hillside breathes black smoke. The platoon leader gives the signal. Engineers move with satchel charges. Riflemen cover the vents. Somewhere inside, a Japanese machine gun falls silent forever. Another ridge taken, another chamber emptied. Another section of the underground war erased by fire. For Japanese defenders, the appearance of these tanks was more than a tactical inconvenience. It was the destruction of a belief. Their whole late war defensive system depended on protected interior spaces, caves, bunkers, tunnel nodes, and buried chambers that could outlast bombardment and force the Americans into costly frontal assault. The mountain, the ridge, the cave wall, these were supposed to be allies. They were supposed to absorb steel and explosive force. But Flame ignored the old rules. It did not need to smash the whole bunker flat. It only needed an opening. Once Flame entered, the geometry of the defense turned against its defenders. Tight corridors trapped heat. Deep chambers concentrated smoke. Curved tunnels spread panic farther than a blast ever could. Ventilation shafts that once made underground life possible now became pathways for burning fuel and suffocating fumes. The stronger and more enclosed the position, the more terrible the effect. This is why the weapon became so feared. And feared is the correct word. Not respected, not merely effective. Feared. Men can steady themselves against artillery because artillery is impersonal. It is chance blast impact. Men can brace for machine gun fire because it is familiar in war. But a flamethrower tank is intimate in a way that artillery is not. It comes close. It sees the mouth of the cave. It points. Then it sends burning fuel into the darkness where men are breathing. That knowledge traveled fast through Japanese defenses. Survivors talked. Tunnel networks carried rumor as surely as orders. A tank that breathed fire was no longer just another armored target. It was the one weapon that made underground shelter feel exposed. Yet the Americans paid for this method too. Flamethrower tanks were high-priority targets. Japanese gunners knew exactly what they meant. Anti-tank guns hidden in caves waited for them. Mines tore tracks off beneath them. Artillery bracketed their approaches. Even riflemen fired at vision slits and fittings, hoping to wound the crew or disable the projector. The crews of these vehicles operated under exceptional danger, often at close range and under observation, because the weapon only mattered if it could get near enough to the target. Many did not survive long, but when they did, they saved infantry lives. That is the other side of the story, and it mattered deeply to the men advancing yard by yard through the Pacific. A cave that had to be taken by hand meant Marines or soldiers approaching within grenade distance, crawling with satchel charges, exposing themselves to hidden rifles, machine guns, and secondary openings they might not even see. A flamethrower tank did not remove risk. It shifted it. It moved the deadliest part of the approach from unarmored men to armored steel. In battlefield terms, that was decisive. By the summer of 1945, with Okinawa effectively decided, and Japan itself looming on the horizon, the armored flamethrower had become one of the clearest symbols of how the Pacific War had transformed. It was no longer a campaign of sweeping naval maneuvers alone or open-field clashes between armies. It had become a war of reduction, of blasting burning ceiling and uprooting defenders from terrain turned into fortress systems. This is why those late-war island battles feel so different from much of the fighting in Europe. In France or Germany, a tank often fought another tank or supported infantry through towns and hedgerows. In the Central and Western Pacific, the tank increasingly fought the earth itself. It fought ridgelines. It fought coral. It fought caves. And when the gun was not enough, it carried fire. So yes, in the beginning, some Japanese defenders may well have laughed at the idea that tanks could break men hidden inside rock. On islands like Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, that laughter did not last. Because once the Americans learned how to put flame inside armor, the cave was no longer safety. It was a sealed chamber waiting to become an oven.